And they had a certain level of worship that they wanted to ascribe to this new king. They had seen the star. They had seen the word of God. They knew his significance, and they wanted to show his worth in a tangible way. And Herod didn't like that. Herod didn't want to share this title with a little baby king. You know, it reminded me of San Diego Zoo. I don't know if you've ever been to the San Diego Zoo, but there's several different enclosures that are pretty incredible. The lion one is incredible, but there's one specific one that I thought about, and that is the tiger enclosure. The tiger enclosure, they have lots of tigers, 3 or 4 tigers in that enclosure, and every single day they only let one out. They let one out. They don't let all of them out. They let one out. And the reason why they let one out is the zookeeper said that if you let all of them out, you would never see any of them. They would hide in their respective corners because they're very territorial, large cats in general, but specifically these types of tigers, they're very territorial in nature. And so they would stay in their area and you would never see them. But if you let one out, that one tiger will roar, he will eat in front of you, he will walk back and forth. You will see him a lot. Why? Because all of the territory is his. He doesn't have to share it with anyone else. I want you to know that Jesus is the Lion of Judah, and he does not have to share his glory with anyone else. He is high and lifted up, and I'm telling you, there's no competition when it comes to glory that's due unto his name. Jesus is the one who deserves all of the glory, all of the praise. Yet Herod had a problem with that. Herod was threatened by the true king. And in verse number 3, we see that Herod, he heard these things and he was troubled. That's a very similar word to the fear that was in Joseph's heart that we studied last week. He was troubled. He was disturbed. It's tarasso. It's talking about this terrifying anger, this distress that's coming over you. And so what did he do? He gathered all the chief priests and the scribes. These were the only people that were under him. The scribes knew the law. They knew the Old Testament. And the chief priests, those were the people that were presiding over the people in Jerusalem and Judea. And he demanded that Christ would be born. Where would Christ be born? He wanted to know. He didn't just ask them, he demanded. The word demanded means he kept asking until he received the answer. And there's a great contrast that Matthew's giving us between the wise men and Herod. The contrast is seen in verse 9. When they found Jesus, they weren't demanding, they weren't angry, they weren't fearful. In fact, when they saw in verse 9, the star that stood over where the child was, they had exceedingly great joy. They rejoiced. Here you have joy because they were following the scriptures and it led them to the star, which led them to Jesus. And here you have the same Jesus that was presented to Herod, and it was not met with joy. It was met with fear. It was met with anger. It was met with intrepidation. And so the difference between the two is one delighted in Jesus and the other refused him.